Well, hello everyone here and everybody who's online, wherever I'm supposed to be looking, I don't know. Welcome to the Head Forwards webinar. It's a webinar in a series of webinars that we're entitling Head-to-Head Battles. This is the third in the series. And we've got a very interesting debate that's going to take place for you soon. Before we go into the debate, just some quick introductions. So my name is Craig Girvan. I'm one of the founding directors of Head Forwards. Myself and Toby Parkins, we founded Head Forwards 12 years ago. I can't believe it's been 12 years, with the belief that we can deliver far greater business value through really effective agile software development. And at Head Forwards, we don't give lip service to the word agile whatsoever, so we do truly believe in agile software development. 12 years on, we've grown considerably, and we have multiple partner clients that we're offering digital services to. In terms of the services we offer, I won't have a big promotion spiel here, but we offer software services such as dedicated teams, augmented teams, project delivery teams, but we also offer some consultancy services. We have a newly formed CIO advisory, and we offer agile change, transformation consultancy services, as well as we are operating in the business information, data analytics space as well. So if you're interested in any of that, please have a look at our website for more information. Anyway, I'll stop with the sales pitch. So we're going to embark into get into this battle. This is actually a debate, and I'll talk about the topic in a second. But first of all, I'm going to hand over to these guys who are the combatants in this debate, who are going to go head to head to see who is going to win this battle. So first of all, we're going to introduce Greg here. Greg is actually the undefeated champion of head-to-head battles at Head Forward, so he's not yet been beaten. He was in a battle against Andy Weir, one of our very good full-stack developers, on the topic of Angular versus React. If you're at all interested in that, it is on our YouTube channel, so have a look there. But he was there and he was the champion from that stage. So, yep. Well, Greg, is there anything you want to add to that? Anything you want to like to introduce yourself in any way?
Thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm Greg West. I've been an employee here at Head Forwards for 6 years. I came for the opportunity, but I've stayed because it's such a great community. I'm a full-stack developer. I've worked on big projects, worked on small projects. I work in the projects team here at Head Forwards at the moment, so I work on a mix of big and small projects, and I do TDD with most of those. Yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Greg. And over here in the blue corner, or is it the red corner? I'm not sure. We have grey corner. Okay. We have John Howell, who is a complete newbie to head-to-head, so possibly an underdog in this scenario. But never underestimate the underdog. But John is not new to Head Forwards. We do know John. John has been working with us for a number of years as a developer, as an architect, as a technical specialist lead. So don't underestimate the capability that he brings to this battle. John, is there anything you want to add?
Well, I've worked across lots of different teams, built lots of different bits of software, and I suppose that's what's led me to believe that TDD is not the answer to everything, which is what I'll be arguing in a minute.
Thanks, John. Okay, so John and Greg both mentioned the word TDD, so test-driven development, abbreviated as TDD for anybody who is in the know, is the idea that in software development, we create tests. Any automated tests that are going to be created for the software are created prior to developing the software itself. Greg is going to be arguing the case that should always be the case. We should always be writing tests prior to creating any software. And John is going to be arguing against that stance. The debate format that we're going to follow, which is what we've followed in previous head-to-head battles, is an ABBA format. And if you ever do a search for that, you'll end up with ABBA coming up, but in your Google search results. But what it means for us is that, first of all, we're going to give Greg 5 minutes to put forward his case for TDD. And at the end of that 5 minutes, at 4.5 minutes, I'll give Greg a warning to say that he needs to wrap up. And then we'll cut him short at 5 minutes. And then John will be offered the opportunity to come back at Greg with his rebuttal. And then we'll offer, and John will be given up to 5 minutes to do for that rebuttal. Doesn't have to use the full 5 minutes if he doesn't need to. And then we'll hand over to John to put his case forward, and similarly Greg will then be given the opportunity to come back at John's case. And then after that, we're then going to turn to some audience questions. We've got some have already been submitted, but also if there's any questions coming in online or in the audience here, as we're going through, please let us know. And we'll turn to those questions, especially if they're related specifically to the nuance of the debate that's going on here. And finally, we will then turn to a poll where you guys, everybody online and everybody in this audience, decides who wins this debate. Okay, so without further ado, if there's any questions, I'm going to start my timer. And Greg, over to you.
Okay, great, thanks. So, TDD, test-driven development. What is it? It's a way of writing code. It's not a way of writing tests. And it's a tool for you, a technique to help you write code, and to be the best that you can at doing that. So TDD has been going on for quite a long time. There's evidence that it's been going back all the way to the 70s, but it wasn't until the mid-2000s that it was really coined as a term in TDD, and it became popular, but it certainly blew up in terms of, I heard about it about then. It's a way of becoming faster and better at development. So Agile is all about developing things quickly. Everything in the Agile Manifesto is about reducing impediments and making what was a slow process, sometimes called waterfall, faster. For TDD, it's a similar thing. When you develop, you need to go as quickly as possible. The faster you can go, the faster you can get feedback, the faster you can work out if what you're doing is right. When you develop application code, you have to deploy it, you have to wait for it to run. You don't know until later you do some manual testing, you find out if it's working or not. So you're writing code and you don't know if it's working. But with TDD, what you do is you write a test first, then you write the code against it. In this way, you can write working code. You don't have to wait to find out if it's working. You know as soon as you've written it that it works. This makes it much faster. It closes that development loop down as small as you can get it, which lets you, in a lean way, progress and move faster. It also replaces some techniques that were there before, like strong typing. There have been studies that show that TDD gives you better results in terms of bugs delivered, in terms of speed of the development team, in terms of maintainability of your code versus those older techniques like strong typing. In that way, it also lets you use more dynamic languages like JavaScript that don't have those features, which makes the code that you're writing all about that code. It lets you make more dynamic code. It lets you refactor it as you want without the risk of breaking it. Also, as a benefit, I said it wasn't about writing tests, but it does let you write a suite of tests as you go on. If you're not pursuing a role of automated testing, that can slow you down. But as we all know, automated testing is really good. So it lets you create those tests to use for automated testing. That, in a nutshell, is what TDD means to me. Someone once summed it up in a single phrase, which was write the tests first. That's all you've got to do. There's a whole load of rules around TDD that say you can only write failing tests, you can only write code against a failing test. I've always found in my career that if you follow those rules too closely, it locks you down. It might take you to places you don't necessarily want to go. It's a tool that you should use. You need to use it in the right way. The question was asked, should you always use TDD? Are there circumstances where you wouldn't? I would say TDD makes you better, makes you faster at writing code. You always want to be better and faster, so yes, you should always use it. And that's pretty much my pitch.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Thank you.
How much time did
you had? You had another minute and a half.
Squandered it.
Yeah.
Go with that.
Okay, so John, I'm going to turn to you now for your rebuttal and what Greg has said there. I'll give you 5 minutes if you need it.
Yeah, so you say that TDD is a technique that makes you the best and it makes you faster and better, but that's all about Agile, and it's about reducing impediment, which is also about people over process. And So my problem with TDD is it's all about the process and not about the people. You don't need to tell someone that they have to write the test first. They can decide, they have the choice whether they want to write the test first or whether they want to write the test second. If they think it's better to write some code and then roll that up at the end, as long as they write the test, I don't think it matters when they write the test. But what they should be doing is writing the test, and they should be writing the test at the same time as the code. And if you do that, then you get all the same benefits. So you get an automated suite of tests. You know if it's failed quickly. You write the test when you write the story. And you also get the same benefits when it comes to weakly and strongly typed languages. So I maintain that TDD is not always the answer.
Thank you, John. So we'll now turn to John to put forward his case. He's always touched upon some things there, but to put forward his case fully for why we shouldn't always use TDD.
Thank you. So as Craig has said, this debate is not about automated testing, which I'm an avid supporter. I think automated testing is almost the best thing since sliced bread. This debate is about test-driven development and whether it is the answer to all development problems. So lots of developers write code, lots of developers write automated tests, lots of developers refactor that code, but that isn't TDD. What TDD is always writing the test first, and that's always, right? So it demands that developers work in cycles with the test created first before you're allowed to write the software that makes up the main system. So the idea is to force developers to achieve 100% test coverage. Sounds great. But in practice, this creates unnecessary and badly considered tests as the developers are struggling to find what to write. And this bloat in the test suite extends the development timescales. These bloated test suites, once they're written, they're rarely refactored because the tests are perceived to define the code base. And that exacerbates the problem. So you also get from these test suites a false sense of security. You think just because we have a complete test coverage, we have the system tested. No, because it doesn't mean you're testing the right things. It doesn't mean you're testing in the right way. But because you're working on this tiny atomic scale, you don't consider the bigger picture. And not considering the bigger picture, you end up stifling the creativity of the developers. That slows down the development work. You affect the morale of the developers. They don't like working in what they see as a boring, repetitive cycle. And even more seriously, you often end up with tightly coupled tests, where the tests end up affecting the core, or being tightly coupled to the core code base. So the idea is that you have this test suite that you can change the underlying code, but if your tests end up coupled to the core code base, then it's fragile, it's not reusable, and when you change one thing on the core code base, actually you end up refactoring the tests, which is kind of not the point. So I think that creating great software is about good automated testing, it's about refactoring, it's about good communication and good teamwork. And the practice of forcing developers to write the tests first inhibits rather than promotes these things. What we need to do is trust the people over the process and let them use their own experience and judgment to decide when and where they need to write their tests. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Very good. Both cases put forward very well. Before we turn to a vote, we'll just have to see if anybody's got any questions.
And I get a chance to rebut him.
Oh, I was sorry, Greg. Yeah, sorry. My bad. Getting excited about questions.
You're not getting your 10 quid now.
Damn it. Yes, Greg, over to you for a rebuttal on John's case.
Okay. You make some valid points. It's true. Bloating, test coverage, timing, these things all apply to automated testing so much as they do TDD. But it is, in my opinion, a tool, and any tool can be used badly. It can be used inappropriately. If you're forcing your developers to do something they don't want, it probably says more about your culture than it does about your technique. I think I wouldn't ever force anyone to write tests. I wouldn't want to do that to developers, but what I would do is try and sell them this great technique of TDD through demonstrating how good it is and demonstrating that you can use it to be better. You say about structural coupling, that's a flaw of TDD perhaps. Also, all tests, if you get a test suite that can't be refactored because the code can't be refactored, then yeah, that's a risk. But TDD isn't a way of writing tests, it's a way of writing code. It's perfectly acceptable, in my opinion, to take the test suite you've written at the end of a TDD session and throw it away, and then create your own unit tests. Yeah. And to do with the Agile thing, you say those things are features of Agile. I think with TDD, we take those features and we apply them all the way down the stack. We take what we do at Agile on a macro level and apply it to the development environment directly, and I think that's a really powerful technique. Yeah, that's my rebuttal to your points.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, now we'll turn to questions from the audience. Is there any questions at all? Yes. Do I need to bring the microphone?
Hi. So, do you think you've missed a bit that part of TDD is driving design and discovering your design? Thereby, to quote John, yeah, some of those tests may become redundant, but then you get rid of them. But realistically, you should end up with some tests at the end of it that are testing the actual features that you are trying to implement. Subsequently with that is the tightly coupled. I would say that that's probably you're writing bad tests if they're too coupled to your code. I think sometimes we talk about unit tests and they become very specific to a class and then can't be refactored. I think the original idea was to have tests that would be able to be implementation agnostic so that you could swap out the implementation and the test still work. Thoughts?
So, yes, some of that can be true. But you know, typically when you're prototyping or spiking, most developers, in my experience, even if they advocate TDD, actually end up writing that spike without tests. And so, to some extent, you've already formed and created the design and the design pattern before you even start writing the test. So I think, you know, you want your system to be testable. It's important that you make sure that it is testable, but that doesn't mean you have to write the test first. You have to consider how you're going to test it, but you don't have to write the test first. What was the second point? Tightly coupled. So, I mean, it's true that tight coupling is a problem. I think, you know, I think everyone's made this point. If you're good at your job, you should avoid that. I just think that because you're working in a smaller scale and you're looking at it on a smaller basis, you tend to be more likely to end up with that. And if you trust your developers anyway, because they're experienced, why do you need to tell them to write the test first?
And what I'll say on the design thing, it's test-driven development. It's not test-driven design. It's not going to help you design your code. If you want to look at techniques like that, there are behavioral-driven design or other paradigms that fit into that. But for me, TDD really is about writing code. You shouldn't be using it to preempt your design.
Okay, thank you guys. Thanks for the question. We've got another question that's come from somebody called Criminal Jelly. Greg, this is to you. How do you manage changes to requirements which alter the underlying data model and can break not only the application, but all of the pre-written tests?
Very good question. I mean, changes like that, I suppose, are fundamental. I would like to think that you'd write your code that was in a way that was modular, so that changes to the data model didn't have catastrophic changes that cascaded through the whole application. I am aware that's not always possible, but that's the idea of the various onion architectures and clean hexagonal architecture, whatever is the flavor of the day, is separating those things out so that doesn't happen. Again, that's a design issue. It's not a test-driven development issue. Just TDD is purely about the way the code is written.
Okay, thanks, Greg. There's another question here online. Again, Greg, it's towards you. John, if you do have answers to any of these questions, those please come in. So, don't you think TDD limits developer creativity and experimentation? Code should be about a happy client. If I have good code and test coverage, should it matter how it's written?
A good question, but I disagree. I don't think it limits creativity at all. I think if you do it right, it's liberating. It helps you write code faster and better. So if anything, it increases your scope to be productive.
Okay, thank you.
And I completely agree with that question. I think that's kind of my point, is that it doesn't matter how it's written as long as it works and it's functional, and ideally everyone enjoys writing it.
Okay, thanks, John. Any other questions from the audience here? Okay, I had a couple of other questions that came before the webinar began. Do I need to be down here on camera, or which were? And I think Greg actually referred to this in his stance. Are there scenarios where the case for or against TDD becomes stronger or weaker? And the example scenarios are proof of concepts, minimum viable products, mission critical or safety critical, or high security scenarios. So are there scenarios where the case for or against TDD becomes stronger or weaker? Just to both of you.
Do you want to go first, Greg, or do you want me to go?
I can go first.
Okay.
Yeah, I did briefly touch on that, but I think because TDD is a way to write better code, it's probably applicable in any scenario. It doesn't really matter if it's mission critical or if it's just throwaway code. It's going to help you. Obviously, if you're writing mission-critical code, you want to write more tests, you want to be more thorough in your testing. TDD can help you do that, but it's not a replacement for doing that.
So I think that it doesn't actually alter the reasons why TDD isn't the right answer. I think when you're writing a prototype, it can be way too meta and abstract to try and think about the test for the question you don't know the answer to yet. I also think that when you're writing large interconnecting systems, complex systems, it can be really hard to mock that out, and so you end up with a complicated system that you don't really understand. The developers often don't understand what the test means after the fact, because it's quite difficult to read. And you end up fooling yourself into thinking that the thing is tested to 100%, when in fact you've written a bunch of tests that don't really prove the right question. So different reasons why it's wrong, depending on your use case, but still not right.
Okay, thank you. I've got one other question here as well, and then I'll just check if there's any other questions online or in the audience. Okay, there's a question here in the audience. We'll go with that.
So obviously, you, for the purposes of this, you've stated your position. Do you always follow that position?
Yes, I always believe that the developer should be allowed to choose. And that includes choosing to write the test first if they think it's appropriate.
At the end of the day, life is all about finding the right balance. So I probably wouldn't advocate anything in isolation or to 100%, but I do believe that TDD can help in every scenario.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question as well. Another question online. Is it true that it's not a tool for all jobs, but a tool to be used selectively?
I guess all tools need to be used selectively. There is no one tool appropriate for any job.
John?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's about developer choice. So if the people writing the code in the team on this occasion, on this day, want to write the test first, great. But tomorrow they might not. But I think it's wrong to prescribe that everything in our team will be written in TDD, or everything in this project will be TDD. And that's often how it's used. I think sometimes you want to use prototype-driven development, sometimes you want to, use something else.
Okay, thank you, John. Any other questions in the audience? Okay, we'll go to this one final question, which I think is quite interesting and a little bit forward-facing as well, or future-facing. Will the development of AI tools, such as ChatGPT, affect automated testing in software development? And does this support the case for or against TDD?
I don't mind going first. So I think it's a very interesting question. Some of the stuff you can do with ChatGPT is quite incredible. You can get it to write your pipelines, you can get it to write your unit tests. I suspect, I don't know is the truthful answer, you might be able to get it to write your unit test after you've written the code. You might be able to give it the unit tests that you've written and say, write me the code. But it's certainly going to have an effect.
Okay, thanks, John.
But I don't think it alters the argument, to answer your question.
So, GPT obviously is the thing at the moment. Other AIs are available. Google have one. It looks like AI will be writing more and more code going forwards. In regard to TDD specifically, like I said, it's a technique for writing code. AI doesn't write code the same way we do, so it's not going to use it. I think it's a human technique, but as long as there's a human involved in the process, as long as you're using AI-generated code, there's going to be a place for TDD, even if it's writing the tests and the code. It's still going to help you, the person in the process.
Okay, thank you, guys. Well, there's another question in the audience and another question online.
So does it just become coding at that point? If you're saying to an AI, write me code that passes these specifications, does that become a better way to write code? You're writing towards actual requirements properly in that regard. With a development driving part of it.
Sorry.
No, that's what I was just saying.
It's also a really good question. Whenever I've used it, I've found the hardest problem, a bit like using Google, only worse, is getting the question right. And you have to define the question really accurately if you want to get the answer you look for. So I don't know. You might even find that the answer becomes, well, coding becomes making sure that question is really well defined. But then arguably that is what coding is in the first place.
And has been for years now. I wrote sort algorithms when I was at university. You don't write them anymore. It's become declarative. You just say the list is sorted, and AI may be the next step of that. You just declare what you want from it. I don't think there's anything to fear from that.
Okay, thank you, guys. Thank you for the question as well. We've got another question here. I'll let you guys answer this question. Just wanted to ask if TDD is an XP practice or something encompassed within Agile. It's been mentioned Agile, but I thought it was the other way around.
Wow. Yeah. I think technically there are definitions in both. Extreme programming is a whole discipline and there's many different types of it, as with TDD. But like I said, for me, it always comes down to a technique, and it's just write the code first.
I think Agile's on a bit of a land grab. It tries to, it's a bit like the Borg, it's trying to subsume everything. But then, they're trying to achieve the same sort of thing at the end of the day.
Yep. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so actually interesting in the debate there, and it was quite nice came from you, John, but it's a reference to the Agile Manifesto and value, the first value, so people and interactions over processes and tools. And interesting, do we see TDD as a tool and therefore not as important as the people interactions, or is it part of the interaction that develops? Which side of it does that actually land? So it was quite interesting. So it's now over to you guys to the side. So for those in the audience, I'm just taking a hand count actually. And for people online, hopefully there's a poll that is live right now. I think it is. And people are voting. So we'll see. Are you with Greg and for TDD, or are you with John and against TDD? Give it a few seconds, is that, or are we good to go? We're good to go. So we'll get to hands up in the audience for Greg. Okay, and against Greg? Okay, so we have, yeah, I'll allow the count to happen. Interesting, close, but there's definitely a winner. I'd say for Greg and against Greg. I did, didn't I? Sorry, Greg.
I don't like this.
For TDD or against TDD? Shortly, the results will be in.
This got a lot more personal suddenly.
Christina is doing the maths for us. Christina works in our marketing department. I'm sure her maths is very good.
You could ask ChatGPT.
Okay, the results are in. So we have, interestingly, and I wouldn't have predicted this myself, but we have a majority that are with John and are against TDD. And so unfortunately, Greg, you are defeated in this discussion. It's close, it's a close vote, but there's definitely a winner there. So congratulations, John. Well done. I'd like to thank everybody that's been involved.
Thank you. Good fight.
Thank you.
Thanks both Greg and John for participating in this battle. It is quite hard, quite nerve-wracking being up here and actually putting yourself forward. I know you guys put a lot of thought into this, so thank you for that. And also thank you to the guys who are helping with the live streaming and the organisation of this event. So great job, guys. Thank you very much. If you are at all interested in these head-to-head battles, even if you're outside of Head Forwards, you're very welcome to come in and participate and even be a combatant if you would like to. So if you've got any ideas or